Hey fellas, welcome to Guys in Grief, sponsored by Emma's Footprints and First Candle. We started this podcast for fathers like us that have experienced pregnancy or infant loss. You see, when we went through these life-changing experiences, we struggled to find resources that were specifically for men in support of navigating this grieving process. We're not doctors. We're not psychiatrists. We're three friends. We're grieving fathers that have been through the unthinkable and want to help others by talking about the unique and often undiscussed perspective of men that have experienced child loss. We welcome you to join us on this journey. Share your stories, the challenges, laugh with us, maybe shed a tear or two, and help each other as we navigate honoring our children, grief, supporting our family, and trying to find better days ahead. Let's get into it. Well, hey everyone, and welcome to episode 14 of Guys in Grief. Brandon, Brian, how are you boys?
Wonderful.
Doing well.
Oh, good. Nice to hear from you. Looking all tan from Hilton Head, huh?
Yeah, you know. It was good. It was good family time. I'm just getting back from vacation, and I'm excited to see you guys. It's good to be back.
Me too, man. I'm as pale as ever.
Makes you feel any better. I'm still the same. So.
That's true. Yeah, nothing's changed there. Well, guys, we have an unbelievable episode, and I'm anticipating already one of the more powerful episodes that we've ever done. And listeners, we're going to go on a little bit of a journey here today, and we're going to take a little bit of a turn, but I think you're going to follow exactly why as we talk through the first few minutes here and as we get into our guest. Today, we're going to cover a topic that is, frankly, so critical and so important to us three men as Guys in Grief, that we felt that it was only right and frankly, with our own passions, that we use this platform to talk about and put greater awareness to the racial injustice and loss. And we're going to cover that from a couple different angles. We're obviously going to talk from our perspective as lost fathers, and Brandon, I want to hear your thoughts about that in a moment as a Black man going through, the loss that you have. But we're also going to take an additional perspective, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But, as Guys in Grief, we are incredibly passionate about this topic. And particularly when it comes to pregnancy loss and maternal mortality. Brandon, talk on that for a moment from your perspective.
So my perspective on this, it's one of those topics or things that happen, day-to-day things. It's a different situation when you're the only African-American, only person or minority in the support groups, in these type of situations without a lot of information. Obviously, we didn't know this situation was going to happen with our family, but the more research we're doing and finding out, I'm not the only African-American that's ever happened, but I'm yet the only African-American that's looking for help. I guess I'm going to the locations. I'm going to the meetings. I'm going to counseling. I don't know the counseling data. I don't know all that, but
you're the only person that looks like you in the room.
Exactly my point. So those type of things it kind of jeers me a little bit. It kind of hits me in the side. Like, wait, hold on. I know there's more people like me in this situation that's happened. They have came to me when it happened. They have my family members have came to me, friends have came to me. Why aren't you getting the help that is needed for these type of things? And I think that's the biggest question that I'm looking for the answer. I'm still searching for the answer. I want the answer, and I need support to get those type of information. So that's the biggest thing for me as a African American, just within this platform, within this, as we call it, how about the Calvin?
Go for it. Fuck yeah.
I'm this crappy fraternity, or this crappy, group of guys and stuff like that. So great guys, horrible situations.
That's right.
So I just need more information. I would love more information on just why.
So we're going to talk on that.
There you go.
Brian, your perspective.
Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of it comes from my work just being on the board of First Candle and some of our initiatives. And, they do a thing called Straight Talk, where they go into all communities, specifically African-American communities, where it's most needed. And they talk about education and safe sleep practices. And it really comes down to education and how important it is in these communities. So I thought this was a really appropriate topic to, get in today. And I'm excited to hear Charles' perspective and learn his story.
Yeah, and personally, my life is surrounded by diversities. As we talked about, Brandon's my brother-in-law, but D&I is something that I'm incredibly passionate about and boldly supporting and championing in my professional work as well. As I think I mentioned on past episodes, I'm an HR executive, and quite literally at every company I've ever worked at, from Starwood Hotels, Madison Square Garden, Gartner, I have either led the diversity efforts or championed those. And up to most recently was the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion at World Wrestling Entertainment, as a white male, under 40, non-heterosexual, non-homosexual, non-disabled, because I choose to focus and try to, create awareness and create a better experience in my professional communities, because it's something that I'm so passionate about in my personal life. So as we three guys have been talking about this topic in our own perspectives of the world and recognizing this platform we had, we felt we were missing an opportunity to use this to really put a really focused attention to this important topic. My apologies. I've got a little bit of a cold here today. Thank you to my 4.5-year-old son that gets preschool cooties all the time. So this is who we are. This is Guys in Grief. And we're going to talk about this shit today, and we're going to talk about it for real. So we're going to approach this episode, like we said, a little differently. We're going to bring in a unique perspective, but I think once you start to hear from our guests, you'll see exactly why. So in just a moment, we're going to welcome Charles Johnson from For Kira for Moms. Charles has dedicated his life to the pursuit of what his own family has failed to receive: safe, respectful, and equitable maternal health care outcomes in America. His passion for systematic change is driven by his love for his wife, Kira, who passed away following the birth of their second son. And if Charles and For Kira for Moms sound familiar, that's probably because you've heard their story before on CNN, Inside Edition, ABC Nightline, People Magazine, CBS News Sunday Mornings, Dr. Oz, Today Show, Oprah. He's testified twice in front of Congress, and many, many more. So on behalf of Brandon and Brian, we are honored to welcome Mr. Charles Johnson.
We need this applause, man. I don't know. We need
Thank
this.
you.
Right.
Fellas, listen.
What an
Listen.
introduction.
I am so glad to be here in the virtual man cave with y'all fellas. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is I've had a crazy whirlwind about 72 hours, but this is the thing that I have been looking forward to on my calendar for a long time, fellas. So first, let me just thank you. From one dad to another, man, what you all are doing and how you all are being transparent, how y'all are being vulnerable, how y'all are being just real and opening up space that is so needed. Like, I can't thank you enough. And so on behalf of myself, on behalf of fathers that have been impacted by maternal mortality, on behalf of fathers that don't even know that they need this resource yet, I want to express my gratitude. I'm really animated, and that's because I'm just excited to be here in fellowship, because I feel like this is a necessary conversation. It's a necessary platform. And I just appreciate y'all adopting me and welcoming me in and allowing me to kind of share my story and hopefully just kind of add some value for your listeners, man. And so just thank you to everybody out there that's been supporting this project, and please continue to do so.
Well, thank you, man. I get chills hearing you talk, and
Yeah.
getting to know you a little bit earlier, and in our conversations and messages back and forth. I think you got a lot of. You have an unbelievable story to tell, but you also have a lot of passion and wisdom that I think is going to be really impactful for Brandon, Brian, and I, and for our
listeners to sleep, man. So we gonna.
So before we get into Kira's story, just want to hear a little bit about Charles. So tell us about your boys, tell us about Atlanta, tell us about who you are.
Yeah, man. So I'm a native of Atlanta. I am ATL to the core.
Where in Atlanta, by the way?
I am in Atlanta. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia right now. And
because
Atlanta's been
when
home.
I messaged you from my 404 area code, you got all excited. I lived in Buckhead for years, man.
So look, so for the listeners, quick backstory before we go into my story. when Brad messaged me, this 404 number pulled up, and I was so excited to be invited on the podcast. I was like, bro, give me your address. I'm coming in person. I'm planning to be there in person, right? And so when he told me that he's in some other shit that's a long way away, I was like, I mean, honestly, if he had invited me, just to be real, I would have flown
anytime,
in, right? But we're gonna plan that in subsequent episodes. There'll be plenty of time for that, man. Because what they don't know, what Brian, Brad, and Brandon don't know is they can't get rid of me. They're stuck with me. So, but in all seriousness, I'm a native of Atlanta, man. I'm a big kid. I always wanted to be a dad. Man. I've been a serial entrepreneur. I've lived in several places. Went to the Florida A&M University for undergrad. Came back to Atlanta. Started a couple of businesses. Made some exits. Had opportunity to do some cool things. And then I met a woman that absolutely changed my life, man. And nowadays, and we'll kind of spend some time filling in the gaps of how I got from there to here. But nowadays, I am a father to 2 amazing kids who are smart, they're gifted, they are compassionate, and they truly are my best work, man. If I don't get anything right, I hope that I get that right. And, my time is between that and advocacy work and really just trying to make our country and our world a better, safer place, and particularly a better, safer place for mothers, babies, and growing families, man. And so that's who I am. I think all of us kind of, carry the tag dadvocates, right? Kind of encompasses, being passionate about something and still centering your fatherhood journey and everything that you do.
I think we need dadvocate shirts. I'm totally down with that.
Hashtag dadvocates. Yeah.
Grayson, that one.
I like that.
Charles, you mentioned being an entrepreneur. Kira was an entrepreneur too, right? If I've done my research right.
Yeah, great research. So Kira was an entrepreneur. And the thing that I say about Kira a lot of times is that when I met her, the thing that was just kind of just, completely knocked me out was that everything that I dug or thought highly of myself in regards, I thought that I was a hard worker until I met her, right? I thought that I was a world traveler until I met this woman. I'll tell y'all a funny ass story about that too. But, I thought that I was family oriented until I met her family and saw the love and all these things. And often said that she really challenged me to be a better person in every single aspect of my life. But this is a woman who raced cars, who ran marathons. She was a damn, I was telling a group the other day that she went skydiving like some people go for jogs. And I'll talk about and she, not the type where you're strapped to somebody. She had done so many tandems that she was a solo jumper.
Jeez.
And early on we were dating. And if you see me in my phone, it's because I'm pulling up pictures so I can hold up the camera. But I would call her and I'd be just checking on in the middle of the day, just reaching out, and phone would be going to voicemail. I'm like, yo, she ghosted me. Right. And several hours later, she's like, "Oh, hey, what's going on?" I'm like, you okay?" I think okay. She's like, "Oh, I went for a jump."
Not a jog, a jump.
Jump rope?
And it's kind of funky since we're talking about, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're talking about a little black girl from East Atlanta. You know what I'm saying? This is not our culture. This is not where we come from. And Brandon, can I get anything? This isn't right. So it's just, that's who she was, man. Fearless. I'd never seen anybody squeeze so much out of 24 hours. I'm trying to find these pictures.
She spoke.
Where'd you guys meet?
So we met 2005, and we actually met at a mutual friend's birthday party.
In Atlanta.
And this is one of those things too, and I laugh about it, but there's always 3 sides to a story. There is my side, there's her side, and then the truth, right? But as circumstances would have it, unfortunately, y'all only get my side. But I'm walking out of this party, and I promise y'all, this is not in my bag. This is not in my bag of moves. I promise to God, right? This is not even like me. So I'm walking out of the party, right? And as I'm walking out, because I come with other friends, and my other friend is driven, so we're leaving. It's time to go, right? So we're walking out. And as we're walking out, I see this little, just really petite, just amazingly beautiful young lady, like standing there, and she's standing there looking
Mean mug.
like over this. Like she is not feeling, and she looked out of place because she kind of had like these pearls on and this sweater. It was not jiving. It was like, you know, very conservative for the event. And then so I was kind of like instantly kind of like fish out of water, not feeling this. And so as I'm walking, I'll never forget, Frankie Beverly, Before I Let You Go was playing, right? And so as I'm walking towards her, we make eye contact, and I start singing it to her. As I'm walking, like we make eye contact, and I start singing it, and I'm looking, and her face just lit up, like with literally this smile, and it was a wrap.
Oh,
Game
man.
over. It was game over, right?
Game
Done,
over.
right? And so, my friends were leaving, and so we chatted briefly, and we exchanged information, and then we started hanging out. And the cool thing about how our relationship developed is, first we were friends, we would hang out. And just to be completely honest, this is like mid 2000s in Atlanta, and this is anybody that was around for the era. That was the era of abundance. If you were a single man, right? And so we were kind of friends. And then Kira ended up moving to China, and she lived in China. She lived in China for like 3.5 years. And
my God!
And then when she came back, that's when we really started dating, right? And really, just really began to like really, really, really dig each other. And then so that's kind of our quick evolution. So,
but thank you for sharing the beautiful backstory, and I know we'll talk a lot about Kira here, and
sure.
No easy transition to that component, but wanted to turn it to you to kind of take those next steps.
Yeah, man. So, like I said, man, I just was fortunate enough to meet a woman that literally changed my life, man. And always wanted to be dad, like I said. And so we welcomed our first son, Charles V, in September of 2014. And that was super dope. I got this namesake, this little, like, it looks like Clone Wars running around here. And, then Kira and I began to talk about how cool it would be to have back-to-back boys, right? And that's something that we kind of chatted about offline, and how that has kind of been this thing about you all's journeys and what you all have been through individually and collectively supporting each other. But thought about how cool it would be to have back-to-back boys. And so when we found out we were welcoming our second son, Langston, in April of 2016, like, tell us, you couldn't tell us shit. Like, we were on top of the world, right? Like, on top of the world. And so we had recently relocated from Atlanta to Los Angeles, right? And kind of like I say oftentimes, the irony of what I'm going to share with you and the audience this evening is that, and just this resonates, and this is interesting because I've told this story so many times, but some of the things that I'm going to share, just thinking about what you all have been through, I know that they resonate differently with this group, and I know that they resonate differently with this audience. But what I was preparing to say, and I just had to catch myself, just looking at all of you all's faces, is that as a father, as a husband, you want the absolute best for your family. You want the best for your wife. You want the best for your children. And so because of that, we made the decision to deliver at Cedar Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles. And so, those of you all who aren't familiar, Cedar Sinai is supposed to be one of the best hospitals in the country. It has this reputation of this fancy hospital in Beverly Hills. It's where all the freaking celebrities have their babies, and it's supposed to be the creme de la creme, right? We interviewed 4 different OBGYNs. We found one that we were comfortable with. And so our doctor's recommendation on April 12th of 2016, we went into Cedar Sinai for what was supposed to be a routine scheduled C-section. Very importantly, at our doctor's recommendation. So it's important to understand a couple of things as we set the table for what happened next. Throughout Kira's entire pregnancy, she wasn't just in good health, she was in exceptional health, right? Other than a little bit of nausea, she was good. All signs pointed to both Kira and Langston, our new baby, being perfectly healthy, right? And the reason, because the other question that oftentimes people ask is, well, why did she have a cesarean? We chose for a cesarean because she had to have an emergency cesarean with Charles's delivery, right? So we've got a plan. We feel good about it. This is supposed to be a walk in the park, right? We've done this. We've done all the overbuying, all the over prepping, we're pros second go round.
Yeah.
And we can schedule when the baby's coming. Piece of cake. Walk in to this hospital on April 12th of 2016 for what we expected to be the happiest day of our lives and walked straight into a nightmare. We went in for Langston's delivery at 2:00 in the afternoon. Langston is born perfectly healthy, 10 fingers, 10 toes. Like I say all the time, super handsome, looking just like me, right? Like this is it. Like I'm talking about like on top of the world. And this was it, right? Like everything we had talked about, everything we had hoped for, everything we had prayed for, everything we had planned for was finally here. And so for those of you all who are listening and who may be familiar with a cesarean birth, after the delivery, they take us back to recovery, and which is typical. And as we're in recovery, Kira's sitting there resting. Langston is in the little incubator toaster thing, taking a nap. And I'm just soaking it in. I'm talking about chest poked out. Like, I get this shit, right? Like,
Yeah.
Dad.
Like my little
Second boy. Yeah.
Come on, man. Pride, right? And I'm just soaking it all in, man. And as I'm sitting there and I look down Kira's bedside, I can see the Foley catheter by her bedside begin to turn pink with blood. But keep in mind, this is around 4:00 in the afternoon. We went in at 2, the delivery. We're back in recovery, and now it's 4. All right. So this time I bring it to the attention of the doctors and nurses at Cedars. They come in, they examine Kira, they examine her physically, they took her vitals. They did an ultrasound. With the ultrasound, they can see that there's fluid or blood beginning to gather in her abdomen. And they also order a CT scan. Very importantly, they order a CT scan that's supposed to be performed stat. So for all of y'all and for all of you all who are out there listening, when I say stat, what does that mean to y'all?
Right now.
Immediately.
Right now.
Right now, right? Like
yes.
Right now, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So at this point, I'm concerned, but I'm thinking my wife is healthy and my baby is healthy, and we're at Cedar Sinai, right? We're supposed to be the best of the best, right? This is 4:00. 5:00 comes. Still no CT scan. Her blood work comes back and it shows that all of her blood levels are abnormally low. Okay. But still no CT scan. All right. So I'm asking, where's the CT scan? They're like, oh, it's coming. 6:00 comes. Still no CT scan. Right. And I'm asking, where's the CT scan? They're saying, oh, it's coming. Right. We're a little bit backed up. Just any moment now. We'll take her. 7:00 comes. Still no CT scan. And now they're starting to say, well, maybe we need to take her back for surgery. And now by this time, she's shivering uncontrollably, right? Because she's losing so much blood. And she's in more and more pain. She's sensitive to the touch, and she's beginning to get pale. So I'm like, yo, where's the CT scan? Well, we may need to take her back to surgery. We need to figure out what we're going to do. 8:00 comes. Still no CT scan. And I'm continuing to say, like, yo, like, look, where's the CT scan? I need some answers. And this game of dismissal and denial just continues to escalate and escalate and escalate. 9:00.
Oh
Still
my God.
There, begging, asking for help. And around 9:00, and the only thing that they've done to this point is give her IV fluids. Another thing that I'll share with you all for the audience and listeners who may be in disbelief hearing this story is all of this all Kira's medical records I've made publicly available. Because oftentimes people hear this and they think that maybe this is embellishment or this is just reconstructing of events. Like literally, this is taken directly from medical records at Cedar Sinai. And I actually share that with you all, and maybe you all can post some of this
Happy to.
for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
9 o'clock. So around 9 o'clock, a nurse comes in to change the IV bag, right, fellas? And after she gets done, I walk with her to the back of the room out of kind of Kira's earshot. And I grabbed her by both of her hands. They have like those curtains, and I kind of on the other side of the curtain, and we're tucked over there by where the sink is. And just out of desperation, I just grabbed her by her hands. And I just looked her in her eyes and I said, look, my wife is not doing well. She's in a lot of pain. They said that they were going to take her for a CT scan. Nobody has come. That was hours ago. They said that they might take her back for surgery. Nobody has come. Can you please just help us? Can you please help us? Right? At which point, this woman snatches her hands away from me. And she looked at me and she said words to me that haunt me to this day. She said to me, sir, your wife just isn't a priority right now.
Oh my God.
Your wife just isn't a priority.
What?
9 o'clock. 10 o'clock comes. No CT scan. I'm begging. Now, paint the picture. It's just not me there. Kira's mother is there. She has a whole family. Like her aunt, who's a retired nurse, is there. My mom, who's a force of nature in her own right. We're all there advocating, asking for just like delay, denial. Oh, we can't find the doctor. We need to get this. There's all these reasons why we just can't get simple things, the bare minimum.
And Kira's in pain during all these hours. She's in pain.
In pain. She was in pain. She was getting progressively weak, but she was conscious and she was aware of everything that was going on, right?
Oh my God.
So 11 o'clock, no CT scan. 12 o'clock comes. It wasn't until 12:30 a.m. that they finally decided to take Kira back for surgery.
8.5 hours after stat.
Exactly. And if you think about almost 10 hours, she's been over
Sure.
10 hours since the delivery, right? So after allowing her to bleed and suffer, it's only for 10 hours. While we begged and pleaded for them to just validate us and just see us and just validate our concerns, right? So at this point, I'm exhausted, I'm frustrated, I'm angry, but part of me is relieved because they're finally doing something. They're finally doing something. And so now it's 12:30 a.m. and they mobilize her. And so she's in the hospital bed. I'm walking next to the bed and I'm holding her hand. And once again, this is somebody who was fearless, like literally like nothing. Like we were joking that she really thought that she was, I don't even want to say that, but she wasn't scared of anything. And as we're making that walk towards the OR, we're walking down the corridor and I'm walking next to the bed and I'm holding her hand. And at that point, she said words to me that I don't ever remember her saying the whole time that I knew her. And she says, baby, I'm scared. I'm scared. And, as a husband and as a father, I did the only thing I knew to do, which was just tell her everything's going to be okay, right? It's going to be okay, right? Just reassure that everything's going to be okay. And there's so many levels to how Kira was failed by Cedar Sinai. But for me, system failures are one thing, right? Procedural failures are another. But lack of fundamental human decency was the greatest failure of all. And so as we're having this exchange, the doctor who had been responsible for Langston's delivery and the doctor who was ultimately taking her back into surgery for the second time, he overhears Kira expressing her fear. And this is what he said to me. This another part of the story that just haunts me. What he said to me, he said, look, literally so nonchalant, he says, it's not a big deal. Sometimes these things happen. I'm going to go back into the same incision I made for the cesarean. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to find out what's going on. I'm going to fix it. And she'll be back in 15 minutes. She'll be back in 15 minutes. And so finally, we get to the end of this corridor. And the doors open for that operating room. And they close behind Kira. And when he took her back in the operating room and he opened her up, there were 3 liters of blood in her abdomen from where she had been allowed to bleed and suffer needlessly for 10 hours. God. While we begged and pleaded for them to just do the bare minimum. And so this man looked me in my face and told me my wife would be back in 15 minutes. And when those doors closed behind her, that was the last time I saw my wife alive. I'm going to share a part of this because I think it's important. I think it's important we push through for the sake of this group and the sake of this audience. And that is that when we walked into that hospital that day, I'll even take it back further. When we walked into the hospital for the birth of our first son, Charles, Kira made me make her a promise. And that promise was that I wouldn't leave the hospital for anything until we all left together. I wouldn't leave for a Chick-fil-A sandwich. I wouldn't leave for a clean pair of drawers. I wouldn't leave for anything until all 3 of us walked out together. And when we walked into Cedar Sinai that day, she had me make her that same promise. And so I'm always really transparent, y'all, about like, I get a lot of pats on the back and bad boys for the work that I've done and the work that I do, and you know how fucking awesome my kids are, right? But nothing can make up for how I feel I failed my wife and how I feel that I fell short of my most fundamental responsibility as a husband and a father. And I'm also transparent about the fact that when I walked into that hospital that day, the thought that my wife would not walk out to raise her sons, it never crossed my mind. It never crossed my mind. But what happened, and I know we're going to get into the layers to this and the path that this has put me on, but it's important to understand this part. And that is that I was oblivious. And I really, honest to God, thought that what happened to Kira was a freak occurrence, and it was an anomaly. I was under the belief as many people in our country still are, that women don't die during childbirth in the United States, not in 2016, not in the richest country in the world. This isn't fucking Little House on the Prairie. This is 2016, and I'm at the best hospital in the country. This doesn't happen. But what happened is that, and I'm interested to hear from you all at this part of kind of this intersectionality on the other side of grief, is that what began to happen is that I began to hear other stories. I began to hear stories of other women who had traumatic birthing experiences, and other women who had these crazy instances of obstetric violence. We call other women who had what we call near misses, meaning they almost died in childbirth, they narrowly survived. And then all these other stories of other women who had lost their lives and made the ultimate sacrifice, giving the gift of life, right? And so as I'm beginning to hear these stories, at first I'm thinking like, and I know y'all may have had this on your journey, right, where you get this information flow and people are reaching out to you with these stories in an effort to kind of make you feel that you're not on an island, right? Yeah. And that you're not alone. And it's an effort because they don't know how to necessarily support you. They're really trying to support you in your grief by sharing, oh, I know somebody that went through this, or this is right. So that's what I thought it was. Excuse me. That's why I attributed hearing all these stories to. But the more I was hearing the stories, the more I was thinking, wait a minute, y'all, like something is just
there's a reoccurring theme here.
Come on, right?
Yeah.
There's a reoccurring theme here. And that's when I began to do research myself. And I came to understand what we're going to talk a lot about tonight is that we are in the midst of a maternal mortality crisis right here in our country. And it's shameful. And for those of you all who are listening tonight, what I want to share with you all, is it okay for kind of talk stats?
Yeah, right ahead.
Some of this stuff? Thank you.
Yep.
So for those of y'all who may not be familiar, some of you all may be, is that the United States, process this now, right here in the United States, more women die in childbirth than any other industrialized country in the world, right? We are number one.
That's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous, right? Let's take it a step further. Let's take it a step further, Brian. Not only do we lead the world in childbirth, we also lead in childbirth-related deaths. Additionally, we also spend the most money on childbirth. So simultaneously, what that means, and if you all were if y'all were a room full of physicians and our doctors, I put up this big graph, and I have this dramatic graph that shows literally we are both simultaneously the most expensive and the most dangerous country in the world to give birth in. It's safer to give birth in many third world countries than it is right here in the United States, right? Countries that we look down on, that we call corrupt and we call dysfunctional. Guess what they can get right? Having a mother
walk out that hospital with their child.
Walk out that hospital, right? And you know what's even more disturbing is that the CDC has determined that 80%. Watch this, guys. The CDC has determined that 80% of these deaths are considered preventable. Think about that. That's mothers that should be here at the first day of kindergarten. That's mothers that should be screaming at the top of their lungs at soccer games on Saturdays. It's mothers that should be dancing at weddings. That should experience the gift of being a grandmother, right? And let me take it even deeper. Every single mother that we are losing is precious, regardless of what their background is, what their socioeconomic status is. Every one of these mothers is precious. And they're leaving voids that can't be filled. With that being said, we cannot have a substantive conversation about the maternal mortality crisis in the United States without head-on addressing the manner in which this crisis is disproportionately affecting African American women and families.
Wow.
And what that boils down to is that African American women are dying 5 times as often as Caucasian mothers. Now, let's get into data for some of the data nerds, right? And there's nothing wrong with being data nerds, but let's bring it home. what people would have you believe is that these mothers, whether they're black or white or otherwise, that we're losing them because they're coming to pregnancy older, sicker, fatter, and underserved, when that's not the reality. There's studies that show, and so when we talk about the racial component, we have to really examine this. There are studies that show, and this is going to blow your mind, fellas, that African American women with graduate and postgraduate degrees are dying at rates higher than white women who are living below the poverty line.
You blew my mind.
What?
Shut the fuck
You blew
up.
my mind.
What?
Right? Listen,
Blew my mind.
this is all, and I will send you all this research.
Some of this is
There's
on
a
your
woman by the
website
name
too,
of-
right?
Some of this is, a lot of this is,
Yeah.
right? And there's actually not this fact isn't, because this is new data that just came out from this amazing research. I have to give a shout out to Dr. Wendy Post,
Awesome.
who's is just one of my sheroes. So Dr. Wendy Post did research on African American women who had experienced extreme maternal mortality and morbidity. You want to know what the average household income for African American women that had been through this was?
I don't even want to guess.
$128,000. These women bring home, right? So what that boils down to, and let me distill that for everybody, is that on April 12th of 2016, when my wife walked into Cedar Sinai, the greatest risk factor that she faced was the color of her skin. Period, point blank. And I'll kind of circle back, and if y'all want to touch on that a little bit, about how and the things that we've learned through this process, and how at Cedar Sinai in particular, I'll share it right now, because I know there's other places we want to go, but we actually have had multiple Cedar Sinai whistleblowers come forward who tended to hear, who talked with specificity about how race played a factor in her death, right? And yeah, it's heavy, man, and it's heavy. And so just move beyond this, and I know I want to shut up and turn this back over to y'all and let you all kind of guide the ship. But, for me, I was devastated, I was crushed, I was confused, and I was angry. But I was struck by a couple things, right? One, how is this happening in our country? And two, how is not everybody talking about this? How is this America's dirty little secret? How is it happening? And that's a whole nother part of this conversation. That's by design. And before we leave the data, before we abandon the data, I have to say this, because I have to say it. There's a lot of people that are brilliant and far smarter than I'll ever be, who have spent ridiculous amounts of time helping to understand this crisis and understanding the data and crunching the numbers and doing the research, and all that's important. But I'm going to tell y'all what I told them on Capitol Hill when I had the chance to testify before Congress, is that while the numbers should make you sick, and it should make us as a country ashamed, there's no data point that can calculate what it's like to tell an 18-month-old that his mommy's never coming home.
Wow. Yeah.
There's no matrices or algorithm that can quantify how hard it is to explain to a son that will be 7 years old next month, right? That will never know his mother, who still wakes up in the middle of the night at 7 years old crying for his mother that he never even met. There's nothing that can compute and quantify that pain or how difficult that is. And so what people have to understand about your story, Brian, about your story, Brad, about your story, Brandon, about the story of every single man in the family that is under the sound of my voice and tunes into this platform, is that you, we, us are so much more than statistics and points on somebody's fucking graph. These are precious lives and precious souls that are being lost and taken from us far too soon. And they don't deserve to be met with data and people that just want to admire the problem. They deserve to be met with solutions and people who are coming with compassion.
Charles, thank you so much. I mean, you've made me cry. I've got chills. Like, you're speaking the truth. Can I bridge the gap a little bit of after you lost Kira and focus a little bit on the grief of how you got to this amazing point where you're such an amazing advocate for people and African Americans, and how did you deal with that grief, and how did you get to a point where you felt like you wanted to dive into the statistics and really make a difference?
Yeah, Brian said on one of our first episodes, like, I don't even know how I got out of bed the first couple of days. Like, how'd you get there?
Like, so interesting, right? So let's kind of like sit there and kind of delve into that immediacy, and I'll share this, and I'll send this stuff to y'all, and you can do what you like. But this kind of became my reality, and I'll share this with you guys. So this is me and the boys, and this is April 18th. Langston was born on April 12th. And so this is us. And so that's Langston, who's brand new, and I'm trying to get my skin to skin in. And I've got Charles both in the bed with me, and he's 18 months old. Right? Wow. And so this became my reality. But I'm always honest, too, that my boys saved my life.
We've said that on this podcast.
We all have.
About our living sons.
My boys saved my life, man. And the point, like, so I literally just, and I'll share this part of my grief. I haven't really shared this a lot publicly, too. So, like, that was what I did, right? Like, I like just immediately was like, oh my gosh, like, and I wouldn't let anybody help. So I changed every single diaper. I did every single feeding. I just threw myself into this whole thing, because in my mind, that's what Kira would want me to do, right? That's how I can make her proud. Like, baby, I got this. And I've literally had both of them in the bed with me. Like, I got the newborn. He's in the co-sleeper. I was a little bit more. I was at least got that right. But he's next to me. I've got, my 18-month in the bed. And so I've got this symphony of, Langston's waking up because he's hungry, and Charles is waking up because he's missing his mom, right? And it's just this thing that just wasn't sustainable, but that was what it was. I wouldn't let my mom help. I wouldn't let friends help. I wouldn't let anybody help. And like, literally my family had to have the intervention with me. And that's a whole nother story to go down that rabbit hole. And so I was pouring myself into my boys, right? And, just that's what I did. And I kind of have this motto, and it's just stronger every day. And I'm also clear that sounds cute, but I also know that grief isn't linear. Grief sure as fuck ain't linear. You have some good days, and you got some hills and some valleys, right? And I'm always conscious about coming in, especially in situations like that, and sounding fucking self-righteous, sounding like some goddamn grief guru. No, I'm not that. I'm far from that. But just trying to get incrementally stronger. And it wasn't that I set with that intention, but we became stronger every day. And so what was happening is, simultaneously, I'm trying to put the pieces back together. I was hearing these stories, and I'm learning more. And something just kind of began to bubble up inside me. And I'm going to share something about my story from a grief standpoint that y'all probably don't know. But so the two people closest to me in the world, Kira and my best friend, Sutton. So Sutton started saying something very early on in my grief journey. And he would say, to me, and just so y'all know, man, like, he's just being completely transparent. And I know we all come from different walks of life. We have people in our lives that are just, Sutton was one of the smartest guys I know, but he was a street cat. And I don't know if people handle things certain ways. And what he would say to me is he'd be like, look, but it was so logical. He would say, look, man, fuck what everybody else is talking about. You got to have some answers for your boys. And
Wow.
what he would say to me is he was like, look, he would say, like, you got to apply pressure on these folks.
Mm-hmm.
And so as time would go by, and I tell the watered down version of this, but I'm keeping it all the way real here, is that's what kind of would just like ring in my head as I was trying to put the pieces back together. I was hearing more and more stories like, yo, I can't let this slide.
Mm-hmm.
I can't let these doctors, I can't let this slide. But there's got to be accountability, not just for my wife, but for all these families. Like, this can't go unchecked. And I share that because about a couple years after Kira passed, Sutton was shot 16 times at his house. And so that
I'm sorry.
it's like literally my brother, right? And so within this 2-year time span, I lost literally the two closest people in the world to me.
Man.
But that still drove me. So back to when I decided to jump out there. So I'm also, another thing too, is we talked about this a little bit before we hopped on the recording. I always have been a very private person. Like, even before this, I barely had social media. Like, Kira and I didn't post our lives. Like, I never had a desire to be front center of the spotlight. And so I struggled with it because I'm very private, but I felt like such. I felt like I owed it to my boys,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like I owed it to Kira. And so I made the decision to share Kira's story publicly for the first time the Friday before Mother's Day in 2017. So literally a little bit over a year. She passed away in April. So the Friday before Mother's Day in 2017, I decided to share Kira's story publicly. And I'm gonna share it on y'all. Feel free to cut this and chop it up in post, but I'll share this piece too. So my family had this intervention with me. They're like, "Nah, you're not ready. You don't need to do this." And Sutton was like, of course he was still around. He's like, man, fuck that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Apply pressure on the folks.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what he said. Like, he said, like, hey man, you gotta apply pressure on the folks, right? And you gotta have some answers for your boys.
God bless Sutton, man. We love that guy.
Yeah. Where'd you end up sharing the story?
So exactly. So this is it. So this is the part I'm gonna tell y'all that nobody knows this shit. Y'all get all the juice.
Yeah.
Right? So I made the decision. Like, I'm gonna do this, right? And so I'm like, you know what? If I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. And so I reached out to a friend of mine that was a publicist. I was like, I'm gonna do this. I need to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hired this chick who was a publicist. I spent money that I didn't have. I think this time I've been burning through savings for a year, right? Like, I'm literally spending money I don't have. And so I spent like a couple of grand to hire this publicist who's supposed to be the shit. And I decided I'm going to do this press conference right out in front of Cedar Sinai.
Wow.
Right? So for a week, I fly out to LA, spending money I don't have, right? And this chick has promised me that she's got all these media outlets coming. She's got these confirmations, this, that, and third. Because my whole thing is, if I'm going to do it, if I'm going to put myself out there, I've got to go all the fucking way.
Right.
And in my mind, I didn't know what to expect. And in my mind, I was like, if I get a person to cover this and somebody to write an article that was successful, in my mind, I naively thought that I was going to go back to being a dad in obscurity and raising my boys, right? Press conference scheduled that Friday. Got the podium out there, like literally, because the press release is going out. So Cedars has security lined up. Like, they think it's about to be a shit show. They don't know it's about to be protests. They don't know what's about to go on, right? Watch this. Y'all want to know how many cameras showed up to that press conference? She told me she had somewhere maybe a dozen, 20 people confirmed. You know how many people showed up?
I don't.
One motherfucking camera.
Wow.
This chick hustled me. She took my fucking money. Right? Right? I fell on my face. face, right? And so literally, I remember standing there at that podium. And so I'm literally telling like this whole thing that I've been, and then I've also been for weeks building it up to go public.
Yeah.
And winding it up.
Nervous. Yeah.
And then nobody shows up.
Oh.
Right. And I remember looking, so there's this the street that runs in the middle of Cedar's campus. And I remember looking across the street, and I know who they are because I met with them in the hospital. I see the person that's head of fucking risk management and their cronies literally sitting over there laughing at me. Laughing. Right? And I saw on my face, dude, like, and I was crushed, and I was like, yo, man. And now is it painful, but y'all look terrible in front of us. He's like, this guy's a joke. Like, he's not even, why are we even like this is like, no. And I remember going back to my hotel room and just being like, yo, are you and it was really one of those things. It was like one of those, like, no, are you really about
this? This is a seminal moment.
Are you really about this? And I'm tell you, like, literally, I remember picking up the phone, and I remember that one of my friends from high school had talked about somewhere along the way that his ex-girlfriend was a producer at Inside Edition, and I called him. I was like, yo, is your girl, I need a favor. I know y'all probably haven't talked, but your boy needs this one. Right. Can you put a call in? She was like, oh my God, what happened to Charles? Can he come in tomorrow? I was on it, like, she's like, I was at Inside Edition, got back to Atlanta. I made some calls, a friend to a friend that knew somebody at CNN, got to CNN, right? And I literally, and from that time to now, and all the things I've been I don't take any opportunity that I've had to share your story for granted. Every single one, I have never had a publicist. I've never had anything. Everything has literally been, after that, those first 2 or 3 phone calls to the catalyst, everything has been people reaching out to us. And very long story short story long, y'all remember, and so I'll go down the rabbit hole. This is kind of an analogy. I use this analogy with my therapist, but y'all remember like Roadrunner cartoons?
Of course.
And how, Wile E. Coyote is like holding on desperately to the Acme rocket.
Yeah.
That's how I felt like Kira's story became this catalyst for what I call the maternal health revolution. And it began to spark conversations that hadn't been had, and to raise awareness, things that hadn't been happening, shining a light on this. And that's how I kind of started on this journey. And like I said, I naively thought that this was going to be, maybe just a little bit of me being vulnerable, and then I would kind of be able to kind of go back. And I'll be real with y'all, for the first year, I kind of thought that too, but but then I was like, oh no, I couldn't get off this ride if I wanted to, right? Because it was just, yeah, man. And so, like I said, I naively thought one thing, but God, whatever you believe in, God, the Most High of the universe, had very different plans for my life. And Kira had very different plans for my life. And so every day I wake up, my knees hit the floor. I give gratitude and thanks. And then, the first step I take is on the necks of anybody that's standing in the way of making our country a better, safer place for mothers and babies. Right.
What is it, Charles? Wake up, make mommy proud, repeat.
Wake up, make mommy proud, repeat. Brad is like the freaking.
He's on point. We got you.
He's like the freaking Mike Wallace. I love it.
Charles, you gave some awesome stats about maternal mortality. Brandon, you've got some, especially on the race side of fetal mortality, right?
I wanted to dive into that, but I'm gonna lie to you, homie. But I'm gonna pivot just a little bit, and I'm sorry if this is.
Do you?
Just the hair, man. I'm not even gonna lie to you, Charles. To hear your story and to let me take that out. To hear your story and to have you open up your heart and be so vulnerable to the world. Again, I said this offline. You're getting your flowers, and you deserve every bit of it.
I'm grateful, brother. Thank you so much, man.
Oh my gosh. Being a black male and hearing that you weren't heard in supposed to be the safest place for you and your family, it my hands are literally getting sweaty, and my other listeners might know when I get
That's Brandon's.
aggravated.
Yeah, that's his thing.
That is like my go-to. I'm so
That's true.
pissed off.
Yeah.
Like I'm so pissed off just because those are that's supposed to be your saving grace, your safe place. You know, you go into this you go into a hospital and you're like, you know what, everything's gonna be right. I heard your story, I felt your story. I'm literally thinking like, I know exactly what you're saying. I know what you're feeling there. Yeah, proud dad, but can't wait. Let's do it. Like, would you put all your trust, your faith, everything into what the doctors are supposed to be there for, and it doesn't come out the right way. It doesn't come out. It doesn't work out. It does work out, but it doesn't work. How? Oh, man, I'm sorry. You took me on a whole.
Okay.
What
No,
what are some things that you can like help out with our listeners, our black and brown folks that can help them just within their process of having expanding their family, having a family, so on and so forth, that day to day thing. What are some things? I'm
like
sorry, I
some
went left a little bit,
practical
but
tools and pieces.
mhm,
So yeah, so let's dive into that. But let's if it's cool with y'all, fellas, let's kind of
please.
talk and just kind of have the real conversation that as men that are in this are having, and that's like, yo, like, because I get a lot of time like I would have went off, I would have turned that place out, right?
Right.
And so we have to have a real conversation about the lived experiences of a black man, right? And the reality of the situation is, it is an uncomfortable, it is an unfortunate, it's a fucked up place to be in,
Mhm,
because the reality of the situation is I was in a place where I had, as a black man,
mhm,
I knew that first things first is Kira knows me. And just painting the picture, I'm there, her whole family is there, and everybody is looking to me as the patriarch. And if I go, everybody's going off. One, two, the whole thing that Kira, and this is the thing that fucks with me too, really heavily. I'm being transparent. I don't really share this often too.
okay.
The whole time all this was going on, you know what the one thing that Kira kept saying to me the whole time was? Baby, please stay calm. Stay calm.
Mm,
Please stay calm. So in her most vulnerable state, she was concerned for me. Because what Kira knew is that as a black man
mhm,
in this country, I didn't have the same autonomy
mhm,
to slam my fist on the nurse's station or grab the doctor by his collar or yell or threaten to get the results that I wanted, because the moment I raised my voice, the moment I became too aggressive, I was no longer a concerned husband advocating for his wife. I would become a threat.
mhm.
That's the reality of the situation,
Yes, sir.
right? So I was having to do everything I could to stay calm and try to be diplomatic. And that's the thing that fucks me these days. Like, yo, should I have turned over a table? Should I have went off? Should I have done those things? But I play this, I'm gonna be real with you, I play it every day.
Okay.
But looking back on it, the only scenario that I can conceive of that would have been worse
Mhm,
is had I gone off, right, yelled, been irate, been removed from the situation, cops call security, takes me out, then Kira passed, and I wasn't there. Yo,
hold
yo,
on. Yep.
You would have regretted it for the rest of your
like,
life.
you talk about, like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And so that's a thing. And so when we talk about these things, there's layers to it. So I want to address that. Moving into like the practical piece of this.
Okay.
That's one of the things that we do as a foundation. We're working on continuing to develop is tools and resources for families to be able to better advocate and navigate situations, right? So that we are armed, all people, but particularly African Americans and minorities, with something other than turning this place out, right? Because that's what we
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Because that's how we've had to show up, just to simply be heard for centuries, right? Because we don't have the tools, we don't have the power. And I'll share this before I get into this.
Mhm,
Last year, I got invited by the vice president to do a thing at the White House. And it was a conversation between myself and some of you all may be familiar with Alexis O'Hannon. Those of you who aren't, Alexis is Serena Williams' husband. So being Serena's husband is his claim to fame, but Alexis's real deal is that he's a multi-billionaire. He's the founder of Reddit.
Yeah, he's pretty important.
And he's a big deal, right? And in this conversation, I really appreciate, and I tell Alexis this whenever I get the chance, is what, and for those of you who aren't familiar, Serena had a near miss birthing experience. She almost died during childbirth. She had some severe complications and was insisting that she receive, ironically, a CT scan or a CAT scan. And she was saying that she felt like she had blood clots. And they dismissed and denied Serena Williams. They wouldn't give it to her for hours. And she had begged and pleaded. And they were like, no, you don't have it. You're just in it. It's the same shit. It doesn't matter if it's Serena Williams, Tasia Washington, Kira Dixon Johnson. It's the same thing. It's your symptoms were dismissed. You weren't taken seriously. You weren't prioritized. By the time they did something, it was too late, right? So she's begging. She's like, no, I'm telling you, if anybody knows I'm fucking Serena Williams. Give me a CT scan. And it'll show that I got, and they're like, no, and all this doctor arrogance, right? And what Alexis said to me, and then I literally got chills thinking about it, is he said, yo, I'm going to be real with you. And he's sitting there in tears saying, he said, the only difference between me and Charles is that I'm a white billionaire. I'm a white male billionaire. And the only reason that my wife, who's Serena Williams, got the help that she needed is when they refused to give it to her, I went out in the hallway and I said, if you don't help her, I will use every dollar that I have to burn this place to the ground. That's how she got the help she wanted. Right? And he said, had that not been the case, I could very easily be in Charles's shoes. Right? And I appreciate Alexis for saying that and being that and being able to be that vulnerable and introspective. And what he said was, he said, there has never been a more illicit example of, I never really realized my privilege more in my entire life than in that exact moment when my wife's life was on the line. And it took me literally putting everything I have on the table as a white heterosexual billionaire to save my wife's life. Just for her to get the bare minimum, not to get anything extra, not to get the Serena Williams treatment, just to get a goddamn CT scan. Right? Mm-hmm. So that's that. And so let's talk with specificity to answer your question. I'm sorry, this is a very long, we're going to be here till Sunday.
Oh, this will be a 4-hour episode. I don't care, man. Let's go.
So Brandon, what I'll say is that there's a couple of things. I think that it even starts as early as how you interview and understand your providers up front, having very head-on conversations with your providers, understanding their intent to practice with compassion and empathy, right? There's one. For example, asking a provider, hey, are you aware of the Black maternal mortality crisis? Mm-hmm. Pause. And what is it that your practice is doing to ensure that I not only survive, but that I thrive? Your response to that question is going to be one of two things. It's going to be, you know what? We're aware of the crisis. It's a shame. And these are some of the things that we're doing to make sure that you have the best birthing experience possible. That's what you want to hear. Or you're going to hear, I'm not racist. I treat everybody the same. Fucking run away. Mm-hmm. If they get defensive, that's a red flag. Or if they tell you that the reason is, they start making excuses for why, their practice or why people are dying outside of bullshit. They have no intention. They're not your friend. But when we talk about, we need to have people as much as possible, it's not always possible, that are prepared to advocate for us and our loved ones when they're not able to advocate for themselves. Certain things like understanding, not just in obstetrics, but understanding that every hospital has a patient's bill of rights, mm-hmm. right? If it's a planned situation like a birthing experience, understanding, printing out, having a copy of that bill of rights in advance is critically important so that you understand. And if you're in a situation where it's an emergency situation, it should be readily Googleable, right? And you can understand what that patient's Bill of Rights will understand is exactly what your rights are and what you are able to do in order to demand a second opinion or an alternative perspective on your care, right? Little things are critically important tools, right? If you're ever in a situation, something I'll share with your listeners too. And like I said, this doesn't even only apply to birthing experiences. If you're ever in a situation or a loved one is in a situation where they ask for a medication, a procedure, anything that you feel as a person is necessary and they refuse or delay it, simply do this. I'd like for you to make a note of that in my chart.
Smart.
I'd like for you to make a note that at 10:01 p.m., you denied me Advil. Make a note in the chart and see how quickly you get the results that you want.
Well, and let's not glaze over some of these stats that we were referring to, Brandon, that we have in our emails. Black and Native American women are 62% more likely to have a preterm birth, and their babies are twice as likely to die as compared to white women. Another stat here. The same report also reveals that low-risk cesarean births remain alarmingly high, with the highest rates among Black mothers at 31.2%. So what happened to Kira on that opposite side of this grief spectrum is happening to women and Black and brown women across North America, in America, every single day at an alarming fucking rate. And these stats need to be known. And, it's something that we as a podcast aren't necessarily in a position to go and make change, but we as a community are in a position where we can do things that we can partner with each other and make this knowledge become something that becomes action. And so, we stand beside you, Charles, in that awareness and recognition that this is an opportunity and a challenge that is systemic and clearly is not just a healthcare issue. There is a race issue that is implicit in all of this.
Exactly.
And Charles, I'm so fascinated in what you've done as far as going into Congress and changing legislation, because in my opinion, that's real change, because, that's law, that's something that the hospitals and doctors have to abide for. Can you just talk a little bit about what you've done and what you plan to do for our listeners that have gone through difficult experiences at hospitals?
Absolutely. So, going back to how I kind of shifted my approach towards advocacy when I first jumped out here and I shared Kira's story, my primary focus was raising awareness, right? Like letting people know that this was an issue. Like, yo, this is crazy. Like, this is my story. This is not only happening to me, it's happening to people all over the country, right? But the subsequent outcome that I didn't really anticipate that broke my heart even further was what I would hear from people that were hearing about our story or were becoming aware is women and families were terrified. I would hear time and time again, oh my God, I wanted to have kids. I'm scared to have kids now, or I don't want to have any more. And that was like, yo, that's not what I want.
Sure.
And that's not consistent with Kira's legacy. It's like women and families deserve joyful anticipation, right? A beautiful, dignified birthing experience. So for me, it was like, it wasn't enough to just tell everybody the sky was falling. It was like, what am I going to do to hold it up, right? What can I do to, as you said, Brian, like effectuate, systematic, generational level change? And so that's when I made a pivot towards, seeking out policy that was doing this. So the story is kind of wild. So I started researching, and at this time, you got to keep in mind, this is 2017. Keep in mind, this is smack in the middle of President Trump's first term. One of the most politically divisive times, probably in American history, damn sure in our life.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
Everybody was arguing, everybody was pointing fingers. And so when I did my research, there was only one bill throughout all the bills in Congress that was addressing this maternal mortality crisis. It was called HR 1318, also known as the Preventing Maternal Deaths Act, right? It was introduced by a freshman congresswoman from Washington State by the name of Jamie Herrera Butler, okay? For those of y'all who aren't familiar with how the political machine works in Washington, D.C., as a freshman congressional anything, you don't have any juice, right? You barely know what a bathroom is. But, you know, she was new. She had this is something that was important to her. And this was her thing, right? So when I found out about this piece of legislation, there were only 13 co-sponsors on this bill, which is really nothing. Congressional co-sponsors. And I reached out and I was like, yo, can I help? And so I started keep myself, this is part of the beauty of this. This is this Republican white woman from Washington State teaming up with this black dad from, you know, Atlanta, Georgia.
Can you talk a little bit about what was on the bill or what? Like,
Sure. That's a great question. So what HR 1318 did is it provided and authorized the CDC to create funding for what are called MMRCs, which stands for Maternal Mortality Review Committees. One of the challenges with maternal mortality statistics and rates and the impact of maternal mortality in our country is that states were not effective or efficiently measuring and collecting data on women that had passed away. And this is difficult. But like, so for instance, in the state of California, when Kira passed away, there was no place on her death certificate that even indicated that she was pregnant. Her death certificate literally just says she died from hemorrhage shock.
What?
Right? Nothing related to all the contributing factors. If there was ever a preventable case of death related to childbirth,
there it is. Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
But the state of California is listing on her birth certificate, her death certificate, hemorrhage shock, right? And so one of the problems is we have states that some aren't even collecting data or they're janky in the way they're doing it. And it definitely was not being collected in a standardized manner. So what HR 1318 did is it provided funding to create these maternal mortality review committees in all 50 states that would then collect the data in a standardized manner. So what happens is with these maternal mortality review committees, anytime there's a mother that passes away, there is a review committee that investigates all the factors around her death. Was it her first pregnancy? Was it her fifth? Was it a vaginal delivery? Was it cesarean? Did she have preeclampsia? Did she have a history of postpartum depression? Was she on public insurance? Was she on private, right? In an effort to better understand, like, what's causing these things?
Yeah, brings accountability too to the doctors.
Right? And so that was the fight. So 13 co-sponsors. I start calling, writing, taking meetings with anybody that would take a meeting, flying up to DC on my own dime, stalking people in the halls, having no clue really how any of this worked. Right? I'm taking meetings with, and a lot of these meetings end up being with blow-off staffers and the whole nine, not even understanding, right, y'all, like how committees of
politics
jurisdiction
work, yeah.
Right? Like what committee this is in. So another big turning point too is I went to DC and I had a friend that knew the chief of staff for, and if you're not really important, like you don't get meetings with the actual rep. That's another thing for people, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to say really important because I'm not really important, but like a lot of times if you're not really making noise, like a lot of times you get staffer meetings, which isn't the worst thing. And I don't want people, if you're passionate about something, to think that if you're getting a staffer meeting that it's the worst thing. Because oftentimes the staffers are the ones that have the juice and actually do the work. So I don't want you to say that. I want you to take that for granted, right? If you're able to get a staffer meeting.
Don't discredit yourself.
Sure.
You are important, sir.
No. But you got to keep in mind that, like, whatever importance that you're misinformed about now, you got to keep in mind this is 2017, where I literally hadn't done anything. I was literally very new to this.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward, I'm on this trip, and I get a meeting with one of my heroes, man. It literally changed the course of my advocacy work. This guy named Bobby Rush. And so Bobby Rush, for those of you who aren't familiar, Bobby Rush he's a national treasure. He actually was a Black Panther out of Chicago, and he was Fred Hampton's lieutenant. those of y'all who are history buffs may have seen Judas and the Black Messiah, the Oscar-winning movie. He's in the anyway. So Bobby Rush, Congressman Bobby Rush, takes this meeting with me. I pour my heart out. He's like, Charles, I'm gonna help you. He was like, who have you talked to on the Energy and Commerce Committee? I'm like, what's that? He's like, oh. He's like, well, Charles, the Energy Commerce Committee is the subcommittee that this bill has to get through in order to get vote in the Congress. I'm like, oh. He's like, look, I happen to be on that meeting. I'm one of the longest sitting members of the committee. He's like, this is what I'm gonna do. He brings his chief of staff and their assistant. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to reach out to members of our committee on both sides, and you set the meeting for Charles and tell them that I sent him.
Huge.
Right. So he was like, yo. So and he's one of these guys, like he might be, you know what I'm saying? Like he's been in Congress for 40 years. Right.
Yeah.
And so he knows how to work bipartisan. So he's setting up Republican and not just Democratic meetings on both sides of the aisle. Okay. That was the turning point. So now I know who to target. Mm-hmm. Simultaneously, we're getting more and more visibility. We're getting Dr. Oz. We're getting People Magazine. And my call to action was, hey, call your senator, call your congressman, have them sign the petition. Demand that they pass this bill. So we're getting this groundswell of awareness, but then pressure from the private sector. I mean, from public awareness, right? Because people are frustrated, they're outraged. You know what you can do with the outrage? Call your senator, call your congressman, demand that they pass it. Repeat. And so, but it became, it was the do-si-do Washington bullshit. So they were like, okay, I'm starting to get traction. They're like, all right, well, you know what? They kept on moving the goalposts, right, fellas? They were like, all right, well, you know what? I see you're starting to get a little progress in this, and it's getting a little, but before we can take this seriously, we need you to get about 100 co-sponsors for this. Came back with 100.
And by the way, that's just the head of the committee too. Right. The head of the committee just decides like what is on the agenda.
He was a senior member, and I'll dig into that. Shit, I'm gonna tell you all this.
Let's go.
It's right. I was a policy major in college, so I love this stuff.
Right. So I'm gonna hit y'all some things that'll blow your mind. This is gonna go till Sunday. So I'm making progress. We're getting traction, and then like, all right, we need to get a congressional hearing on, right? Meanwhile, and I hope he's listening. Here's the wild part: when you talk about the actual chair of when you talk about the actual chair of the committee, and I have to be careful because like when people get on board, even if they get on board late, you kind of got to give them some grace in this space. The point is, he got it even though he was late. But the guy who was the actual chair of the committee at the time, who ducked me for months, wouldn't take a meeting for me, was Republican. It doesn't matter what party he's with, because now by this time that was one of the things I'm most proud of this legislation. And one of the other turning points is that we didn't allow this to get caught up in. I refused, for my wife's legacy to get politicized. Mm-hmm. And I would be very clear, like this is when you talk about this issue, and this is how I reframed it too. One, I took it away from the data and I humanized it, and I was like, "Yo, damn the data! Let me come in this office and tell them the exact same thing I told you guys."
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And look them in the eye and then dare them not to sign on to this bill.
Right.
Yep.
One. Two, the second thing we did is I framed it in a way as a unique opportunity. And when I would go in these offices, I would say, look, I know this is a difficult time, right? And everybody's pulled it. Everybody's fighting over all this petty stuff. I said, wouldn't it be amazing if you could find something that you could unite behind?
Yeah, it's universal.
Something uniquely bipartisan in this political climate and show your constituents that you can make something happen. Mm-hmm. And what I was saying, I would break it down in simplest terms, right? And that's what you have to do. Like, Brian, you understand this as a policy major. I would say, look, there's two types of people in our country. Either you are a mama or you got one.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Nice.
So when you want to talk about constituencies, people who care about mothers and babies, we're the largest constituency in the country. Don't you think you want to get something on the board?
Nicely done.
Yeah. And you start painting like this, and so they see opportunity.
Yeah.
Instead of in this vast chasm of stalemates and BS and infighting, right? So that was the second thing. But the guy who was the committee chair at the time, you want to take one guess who was the actual committee chair who wouldn't meet with me? You want to take a guess what his day job was?
It's probably like a fireman or something.
That'd be like too much. Like I could probably write that. I couldn't write this. I couldn't write this. I bet Brad has a guess. You got to guess what his day job was?
I really don't. I don't.
Brandon.
I'm going to say something in the medical field or hospital field. That's just my guess.
A doctor.
OB?
He was a doctor.
OB? Why?
Oh, shit. I didn't want to say it because I'm like, I literally said it when you were saying, like, teasing it.
I'm
like, there's no way it's an OB, and I'm not going to put it out there. It sound like an asshole. I'm like, I'm not going to put that out there.
out there.
What a fuckhead.
Right?
What state was he in?
By the way,
I couldn't write this, right? So fast forward, we get it. They finally, like, look, we're gonna hold a congressional hearing on this. I go up to DC, pour my heart out, and it really got moving, and they got it to the floor for a vote. It made it through the House, it made it through the Senate with unanimous consent. People did exactly what we were hoping for. They unified, bipartisan support, got it done, and the bill was dedicated to Kira on the floor of the Senate.
That's incredible, man.
Congratulations!
Thank you. But there's this. It's just the beginning. So that was a big first step, but it's just that it was just a first step.
Yeah.
So last year we went back to Capitol Hill. I was like, this was a doozy getting one bill passed, and we went back with what I'm really proud of, which is a landmark legislative package called the Black Maternal Health Omnibus, which is comprised of 13 different pieces of legislation addressing all of the very, very, very challenging but very vast issues facing not Black women, but all mothers in our country. So let me just say this in this space. So if there are people out there that are listening, or if you decide to advocate for this and have these conversations and tell your friends to support and sign the petition and support the omnibus, and somebody asks you, why is it that we need legislation specifically for Black women? The simple answer is because when we fix this for Black women, we fix it for all women. Black women are disproportionately affected, and every single provision in this piece of legislation will raise the tide for every single mother in this country.
Good point.
Right. So we have pieces of legislation for social determinants to health, access to care, diversifying the perinatal workforce, even things that oftentimes forgotten segments of our population. We have a bill specifically in there about protecting the rights of incarcerated moms. Right. There have been even as recent as 2020 forced hysterectomies going on in jails in California. Right. You have this prison privatization, and then they come in and you hire doctors that are getting paid based upon the number of uteruses they're snatching out.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
Right. You have the same thing going on. We had the same thing going on in 2019 in an ICE detention facility right here in Georgia. Right. These women are scared. There's a language barrier, and somebody comes in and tells you, we need to tie your tubes. It's for the best. Because guess what? They get incentivized for every one of those they do. That's how they get paid. So they're just running at you.
Come on.
It's your number's been called.
So Charles,
right? And so we have that, and so there's a bunch of legislation. You can go to the our website, forcure4moms.com. You can go to the Black Maternal Health Caucus's website and read about all the various different bills. Within that, there's also the Kira Johnson Act that's named for Kira. And so, please sign the petition. I'm going to share with the fellows how you guys can do that.
We will share that instantaneously. I've got this is a choose your own adventure type of question here. So Brian actually leads for us every episode what we call G&G Q&A, and we cover off topics for grieving fathers that are, really poignant and kind of the things that hit right to what we go through. Some of them are supporting your family after loss, coping mechanisms, your living child's impact, triggers, faith, dealing with anger. Pick your own adventure. Talk to us on any one of those topics that, as a grieving father, regardless of it's, the loss of your spouse or loss of a child, how did you deal with your faith? How did you deal with navigating anger? How did you deal with raising your children through loss? Talk to us on any one of those or multiple.
Yeah, so I'll kind of go through the kids, right? Because that's really the foundation and something that I hope may resonate. Because I think one of the things that we all struggle with is with this grief thing, right? There's no manual for this, right? And oftentimes we're left with what other people think or what we might think or how to deal with this. Or so one of the things that I was struggling with very early on is how do I deal with Kira's obvious absence, but how do I do that and navigate that with my boys, right? And so I didn't know if I should, take all the pictures away because there's going to be a trigger for my son. I didn't know. I didn't know what to do. And I made the decision. I reached out to a friend. I literally, it's so crazy, literally on the drive to Kira's memorial service, I don't even call it memorial service, celebration of life service. A friend put me in touch with a childhood psychologist because I was just struggling with this. And that was the phone call I had the whole drive on the way. Because I was trying to figure it out. And so I made the decision very early on that Kira and her memory, subsequently her energy, would be present in everything that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally. So like when you walk in our crib, like there's huge pictures of her everywhere. Like this is my desk. Like even when you walk in the office, like and that's her like right there.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
When you walk like literally over our mantle, there's a freaking 4-foot, picture. We tell stories, we watch videos. When Beyonce comes on the radio, we turn it up as loud as we can. This is mommy's favorite song. We go places. Mommy took you here. She loved to eat this. Like we tell funny stories, right? And so my hope and what I think that I've cultivated is that I never want the subject of Kira to be taboo or off topic. Mm-hmm. And even though sometimes it's difficult and it may be triggering, I never want my boys to wonder. And I want them to really understand in their hearts who their mother is and what she stands for and the manner in which she lives her life. Mm-hmm. And it's cool because they lean into that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Mommy like this. Okay. Like they understand like certain things that they're good at. They get that from her, right? Like Kira spoke 5 languages. So like, when they're talking and when they're in, they get it, that they get certain things. And so that's one of the things. I think the other thing, if I can touch on, and it's never, it's never easy, but like it's working for us. It's working for us. And, and I'll talk a little bit about anger, right? So for me, the anger thing is real, right? I think that's one thing that's then that I deal with not only personally, but with other brothers. And I say brother, I refer to brother, like regardless of creed, color, background, ethnicity, like we're all brothers in this, fight to
community.
It's community, right? It's community. It's so funny, particularly living in Georgia. As a side note, like I walk in and go to the gas station and I see these, 70-year-old, white guys. I have to go, hey, you doing all right, brother? And they like,
what did you say?
Yeah, I'm talking to you. Wow, yeah, I'm talking to you. Mm-hmm. And so, anyways, I think
they feel so cool after that. By the way, Charles, once you do that, Tim.
That's what I'm here for.
That's right.
So they, and so the anger thing. And I've been in some dark places. I've walked through some dark places with families that I've supported. And for me personally, right, with that anger, like passing legislation and shit is cool, y'all. And, Oprah is cute and all these things are great and stuff. But to be real with y'all, like selfishly, this is an avenue for my anger. This is a way for me to channel the things in my life that are beyond my control into something positive. Because if not, it's going to manifest itself someplace else. And so for me,
so well said.
There's so many things in my life that that are beyond my control that I wish turned out differently. Right? I go back and I replay those incidents. When I like the thought of those doctors or certain people trigger like physical responses for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's how deep it is. But those things are beyond my control unless I take control. That will lead to something,
Mm-hmm.
that is irreversible.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, the things that I can't, so understanding that the things that I can control and that I pour myself into are my work and my boys.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I do.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to what you said, but like my motto is literally like, I try and simplify, like it's wake up, like take each day one day at a time. Our goal is to make mommy proud, whatever it looks like that day. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Repeat. Next day is wake up, make mommy proud, repeat. And that also allows us to kind of center ourselves. And as difficult and as painful as it is, like Kira was joy and she was everything about it, was sunshine personified. And it allows us to kind of walk in that energy as much as possible. And every day is not going to be perfect. And as men, we're going to be human and we're going to find ourselves in those dark places. But if we can just have a kind of North Star that will guide us, you know what I'm saying? And everybody's journey to grief, or what's brought them to grief, is different. I hope that me sharing what happened for me can be applicable and maybe possibly slightly fine-tuned and reimagined for somebody else's individual circumstance, right? If we are dealing with the loss of a child, maybe there's a way to center like, this is how he or she would want to see us living our life. This is how we can celebrate. This is how we can lean in. And it also makes space, you all, for joy, but then also, pain and joy can coexist, right? Maybe not at the exact same time, but in relative close proximity. The other byproduct of making that choice, that one of the reasons I had to do it, y'all, is, and tell me if y'all can relate to this. We talk about this journey and it not being linear. Sometimes what will happen is you'll be having a good day, mm-hmm. and then people around you don't know how to grieve, and they'll just, my heart breaks for you, and I just,
oh yeah.
And
we've talked about it a lot on this podcast. Yeah. I mean, it's such a roller coaster, and one comment or one person can just send you into.
And that's to say that, and people, and because it's a thin line between support and disruption of your process.
Yeah, good intentions, but
good intentions, and everybody's got good intentions. And God bless, because I don't want it to be perceived. And thank you for saying that, Brad. Right, but like the thing is, what it does is it allows people, it gives people around you permission to be joyful. And so what would happen is when people would come by to see the boys, it wasn't always just, woe is me. And I just, we just sure do miss her. And just, it's like, yo, you know what? Tell me a funny story about, and so cousins are talking about the time that they got out late for curfew or somebody, you know what I'm saying? And it's laughter and it's joy. And there's going to be some tears, there's going to be some pain, but it allows space for light. Mm-hmm. In very dark situations, right? And I'll give y'all another thing. And I'm a little bit different too, and I also don't give a fuck about certain things that certain people might. Mm-hmm. But like for instance, you gotta keep. We're from the deep south, but like because there's certain ways that people grieve. There's certain ways that people do funerals around here. Mm-hmm. I made the decision. I was like, yo, don't wear black. If you're coming to her funeral, don't wear black. Wear the brightest thing you got in your closet. That's consistent with who she is and how we're not going to grieve. We're going to celebrate her life. It was fucked up. It was short. I'm going to handle that part. I'll make sure that there's justice and accountability for that part. But she deserves the celebration. Mm-hmm. And she deserves to be celebrated. Right? I'll take care of the rest. But this, and around my boys, this is how we're going to operate.
Amazing.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
Charles, can I just ask you one kind of final question?
Sure.
What advice would you give to the men out there who are grieving lost ones. You've really shown us kind of the perfect way to, grieve, but what advice that got you through from the moment you lost Kira to where you are talking to us today? Like, what advice will help our listeners?
I think, Brian, that's an excellent question. And one of the things that I've enjoyed most about this is I've been asked so many questions I've never been asked before. I think one is that the process is yours. Your process and your journey is yours. Do not allow anybody's expectations or limitations on you to box you in. Right? This looks like what you make it. If you need to do things differently, and that is consistent with what your heart is telling you to do, that's what you do. Right? I would also strongly suggest, one of the things that I'm also really clear about, and which is why I just commend you off of this, is that solitude is the enemy. Right? Solitude is the enemy.
Say it.
And it's another t-shirt.
Damn right. Yeah. Advocate and solitude is the enemy.
Advocate, right? And solitude is the enemy, right? And so seek community somehow, some way. Right? And everybody's not going to understand you, and the people that love you the most aren't going to be able to completely understand. And whether that and grief and like a traditional support group might not be your thing. Therapy might not be your thing.
That's why we created a podcast.
Right? Yeah, right. But sitting here listening to some scruffy ass bozo stranger might be your thing, right? And I'm the scruffy bozo stranger. These are some groomed, handsome gentlemen, right?
Yeah, I'm the guy with the
good hair.
So find it, and part of finding your community and what works for you, is understanding what doesn't work. So give yourself grace as you try and go through that. And if something doesn't work, please don't continue to shut everything and everyone else out.
Unbelievable point.
I was having literally this conversation last night with a friend's daughter, and she was talking about making decisions between sports and playing what you wanted to do and trying out new things. And I was like, yo, like, just like a career, like, part of understanding what you want to do is understand that I really don't dig this. And understand, I'm not going to say things like, time heals all wounds and the things that you get in greeting cards. But what I will say to you is that your pain will never go away, but it will evolve. It will evolve as you find ways to make it a part of your existence, right? And by doing that, whether that's channeling it and finding something positive and it has a positive impact on the world, or finding other ways to do with it. But, solitude is the enemy, and seek community how and when you can.
Charles,
very well said.
You are a force, man. We are so honored to have you here with us.
The honor is all mine, man.
Yeah,
to share Kira's story. This has been one of the most amazing experiences that I've ever had talking in this space.
And I think you're going to inspire a lot of our listeners. Yeah. I know we got into policy change. I'm kind of a nerd like that, but
sure.
I know I was in open hours for our last guest, the Sad Dads Clubs, and there was a lot of guys on there talking about malpractice and that they were angry about things that happened.
Great point.
And you just kind of laid the groundwork, I think, for a lot of those types of listeners
Absolutely.
that experienced the same type of, you know, inequality that happened maybe in a hospital, and it's fucked up. And I'm glad you're bringing, you know,
into the light for sure.
Yeah. Thank you. So
No,
I really appreciate it.
Like I said, fellas, like I am honored to be here, man. I think it's just a testament to like this, the power of connectivity, the power of social media. My only regret is that I wasn't here sooner.
We're only on episode 13, man. So you're in early with us, baby.
Like, y'all sent me a DM, and I was like, "Holy shit! Like, what is this? And how did I miss this?" But you know, like I said, man, y'all, you know, I what you all are doing, and the other thing too is I think we got to hold space for y'all, right? Because the easy thing would be for y'all not to do this. The easy thing would be for you all to, because the reality of the situation is what this trio has, and you all have the support, right?
We have each other.
What people need, y'all have each other. Y'all have this brotherhood, and you all could be selfish with that, but instead you all are building. And I'm just a big fan, and I'm just really intentional of just aligning myself with doers, and that's what y'all are. And people who are doers and who don't admire problems but build and create solutions. So I can't thank you all enough for doing it. And I'm definitely going to be. Unfortunately, I got a whole lot of guests for you if you need them.
You're the man, Charles.
And I can connect you, but I want to figure out how we're going to stay tapped in and make sure that we elevate the work that you all are doing. And,
thank you,
because it's so important.
I definitely want to.
Yeah, thank you so much.
This is speaking for all of us, but you will have an extension of brothers, families across the nation now. I mean, Buffalo to Connecticut to Pittsburgh. I mean,
30 different countries of listeners.
For real. So you got listeners, you got brothers.
Everybody.
Yeah.
You got brothers all across the world right now. So again, man, we appreciate literally everything you dropped on us. You dropped some nuggets, some jewels, some gold. I can't emphasize how much information you gave us. And
thank you so much.
And keep.
And I'm listening, man. That was awesome. Thank you.
I'm appreciative, man.
Yeah, keep leading the charge.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all I can say. I mean, you're really leading the charge to make a change, and it's so fucking cool.
So, Charles,
thank you.
We always like to end our episodes with our guests having the final word and speaking their lost one's name. So we want to give you the final words here to speak Kira's name and say anything you like, my man.
I think I'll just keep it simple, man. I think that our motto, what I shared at Kira's celebration of life, is that the beautiful thing about love is it has the ability to turn pain into power. And as long as there's breath in my body, I'm going to continue to speak the name of Kira Dixon Johnson.
And we will do everything to continue to echo Kira's name as well, along with Story and Beckham and Ariana and Austin and all of the children that have been represented on this podcast. Charles, it has been an absolute honor to have you.
Angels. Thank you so much, fellas. Thank you so much.
Keep leading from the front,
Absolute
man.
Pleasure.
Absolutely. Y'all, blessings to you all and y'all's families. I'm here if you need me. I'm going to respond to this email with my cell anytime you need me.
As we're doing
all
it.
Right.
Everyone, thank you for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
Peace and love, guys. All right. Peace.